Hi friends, welcome to our channel MedMatter. How about a small discussion on fluid electrolyte disturbances? Today we are discussing in detail about hyponatremia and basic physiology of fluid and electrolyte balance. Water is the most abundant constant of human body. It is about 60% in males and 50% in females. The difference in this distribution is because of the variation in different tissue masses. Distribution of adipose tissue is more in females and muscle mass is more in males. The total body water is distributed in two compartments, the extracellular compartment and the intracellular compartment. The intracellular compartment contains around 2/3 of the total body water and ECF contains around 1/3 of the total body water. And the extracellular compartment is further divided into extravascular compartment and intravascular compartment. The intravascular compartment or plasma and the extravascular compartment and interstitial fluid. In an average adult man, around 40 liters of water is present, which we further divide into 2/3 and 1/3 ratio in ICF and ECF volume. It will give around 24 liter in the intracellular compartment and 16 liter in the extracellular compartment. The extracellular compartment is further divided into plasma and interstitial fluid. So plasma contains around 5 liter of fluid and interstitial compartment contains around 11 liter of fluids. Let's see how the distribution of electrolytes varies in these compartments. The most abundant cations in intracellular compartment is potassium and the most abundant anion in intracellular compartment is phosphate. While in extracellular compartment, the most abundant cation is sodium and most abundant anion is chloride. Of course, there are other cations or anions are also present, but we are concentrating only in the most abundant cations and anions like sodium, potassium, chlorine and phosphate. Osmolality of plasma can be determined through this equation. 2 into sodium concentration in plasma plus glucose concentration in plasma by 18 plus blood urea concentration in plasma by 2.8. It gives around 285 to 295 milliosmol per kilogram of water. These are the basic electrolyte values we should memorize. I have made these values as round figures so that we can memorize it easily. Anyway, we have to know only the normal range of these compounds. Sodium around 135 to 145 millimole per liter, potassium 3.5 to 4.5 millimole per liter, chloride 98 to 106 millimole per liter, magnesium 2 to 3 milligram per deciliter, phosphorus 3 to 4.5 milligram per deciliter, calcium 9 to 10.5 milligram per deciliter. So magnesium, phosphorus and calcium are present in milligram per deciliter. Hypovolemia and dehydration are two different cases. Loss of both salt and water causes hypovolemia. It results in contraction of extracellular fluid. Dehydration is relatively pure water deficit, which usually results in hyponatremia. The causes of hypovolemia can be divided into extrarenal and renal cases. The extrarenal causes are vomiting, diarrhea, peritonitis, sweating, burns. And in all these ways, we lose both water and solids. So in extrarenal cases, almost the urinary sodium will be less than 10 milliequivalent per liter. This is because most of the solids are already lost through all these ways. So the kidney will be trying to concentrate as much as sodium it can. And coming to renal cases, osmotic diuresis, glycosuria, uncontrolled diabetes, excessive use of mannitol, all these results in excessive loss of salt and water through urine. And tubular cases like salt wasting tubular disease, renal failure, this chronic renal failure and diuretic phase of acute renal failure, and Addison's disease where there is a mineralocorticoid deficiency. So aldosterone have an effect in sodium and water reabsorption. So in deficiency of aldosterone results in increased loss of sodium and water through urine. In these renal cases, the urinary sodium will be more than 20 milliequivalent per liter because the solute is losing through urine. To treat hypovolemia, we have to replace the lost volume either by increased oral intake or IVF administration. The fluid for IVF administration is normal saline or renal lactate. Let's look into the basics of sodium absorption and excretion. Majority of sodium is in the extracellular fluid, and in a day we consume an average of 1 to 1.5 gram of salt. This salt, which reaches the intestinal lumen, that enters the enterocyte through two important transport mechanisms: sodium glucose symporter and sodium hydrogen ion exchange. This absorbed sodium in the enterocyte is rapidly exported to the interstitial space through sodium pumps. This creates an osmotic gradient in the interstitial space. In response to it, water also diffuses from the intestinal lumen into the interstitial space. This water as well as sodium then diffuses into the capillary blood down concentration gradient. Regulation of sodium excretion occurs at three main regions in nephron: proximal convoluted tubule, where 65% of the sodium is reabsorbed, thick ascending loop of Henle where 25% of the sodium is reabsorbed through sodium potassium dichloride channel, DCT where 5% of sodium is reabsorbed through thiazide sensitive sodium chloride co-transport and some amount in the collecting duct. Sodium excretion is regulated through 4 major steps. The first and important one is circulating level of aldosterone, which acts on the epithelial sodium channels and have a facilitating effect. It supports the epithelial sodium channels to reabsorb sodium and water. While atrial natriuretic peptide, as the name suggests, is secreted from the cardiac atria and have effect of natriuresis, that is secretion of sodium through urine, and it acts through cyclic GMP and inhibits epithelial sodium channel, thereby inhibits reabsorption of sodium and water. Similarly, prostaglandin E2 also have an inhibitory effect on epithelial sodium channels. The third and important one, the angiotensin 2, which acts on the proximal convoluted tubule and helps in reabsorption of the sodium. Around 65% of sodium is reabsorbed from PCT. And then the rate of tubular secretion of potassium and hydrogen ions also have effect on sodium reabsorption. Sodium reabsorption is coupled with hydrogen and potassium ion secretion in tubules and play an important role in acid-base balance. Let's go to our topic proper, hypernatremia. As the name suggests, is the increased level of sodium concentration in the plasma. The concentration of sodium will be more than 145 millimole per liter. This hypernatremia can occur in 3 different ways: hypovolemic hypernatremia, hypervolemic hypernatremia, euvolemic hypernatremia. Hypovolemic hypernatremia, where sodium concentration is high but there is loss of water. Hypervolemic hypernatremia, where both sodium and water concentration are high. Euvolemic hypernatremia, where there is a retention of sodium without loss of water. Let's discuss the first scenario of hypovolemic hypernatremia. What happens here is sodium concentration is more and the water level is low. It is usually seen in bedridden patients, mentally retarded patients, post-op patients where there is a limited access to water. Let's see how this happened. The causes for hypovolemic hypernatremia can be classified into extrarenal cause and renal causes. Extrarenal cause, as in case of osmotic diarrhea, lactulose induced or sorbitol induced diarrhea, where there is loss of salt and water will be there, but the loss of water will be more than salt. It doesn't happen in secretory diarrhea as in cholera and Carcinoid syndrome, where the osmolality of fecal matter is same as that of plasma. Then the second reason, insensible water loss, sweating or through respiratory tract. During vigorous exercise, rapid breakdown of glycogen into lactate happens, which results in the shift of water into the intracellular compartment, results in a contraction of the extracellular compartment. In these cases, urinary sodium will be less than 10 milliequivalent per liter. Coming to the renal causes, osmotic diuresis, like in mannitol, where in severe cases we administer mannitol, so there will be a loss of solute and water will also be there, but the water loss will be more compared to the solute. Then non-absorbed organic solutes in tubular lumen, as in case of hyperglycemia, these non-absorbed organic solutes will draw water into the lumen and thereby excrete it through the urine. Then diabetes insipidus cases. Most of these patients presents with increased thirst and dry mouth, of course because of hypovolemia. Then muscle weakness, rigidity, mental confusion. In severe cases, intracranial hemorrhage, coma, and death can also happen. The patient's signs will be hypotension, tachycardia, raised hematocrit. Of course, sodium concentration will be more than 145 millimole per liter. And treatment in these cases are by the administration of 0.9% NS. Here we may get a doubt, why can't we use normal water? We don't use normal water here, as normal water, administration of normal water considerably reduces the osmolality of plasma. This causes the water in the vessels to get inside the RBCs, results in swelling of RBCs, and ultimately it may burst. The second scenario, hypervolemic hypernatremia, where sodium retention and water retention happen simultaneously. Here also we can classify the causes as extrarenal and renal causes. Extrarenal causes are mainly iatrogenic in nature. As in case of metabolic acidosis, we administer sodium bicarbonate, which raises the sodium level. And in the treatment of abortion, which we give intrauterine wash with hypertonic saline solution, and there sometimes it may enter the circulatory system. And also similarly in the case of hydrated cyst, where hypertonic solution is administered to contract the cyst volume, sometimes it may enter the vascular system. Coming to the renal cases, increased level of aldosterone increases the sodium and water reabsorption from collecting duct through epithelial sodium channel. We already discussed that case. Treatment modality is different here. Here we have to excrete out the excess fluid and salt by diuresis. Coming to third scenario, euvolemic hyponatremia, where sodium retention happens without water loss. This is seen in diabetes insipidus patient, where they try to replace the fluid loss by increased water intake and neglecting sodium loss. It also seen in hypothyroidism. Urinary osmolality will be less than 300. 5% dextrose should be used in situation of pure water loss such as diabetes insipidus. In all these cases, the approach for correction of sodium differs in acute and chronic patient. In chronic cases, the hypernatremia is to be corrected slowly. Correction rate should be less than or equal to 10 milliequivalent per liter over a day. But in acute cases, rapid correction should be done to prevent neurological deficit. Excessive rapid correction of hypernatremia can lead to cerebral edema. Thank you.